first lesson, we have discussed briefly about UiPath Studio. I have shown you, what all different panels are there, right? So today we're gonna discuss about UiPath Studio Activities, and then we'll have, some of the working session where we'll create some sample workflow to try to understand if-else statement and those how to take an input, message box, output, and all those kind of stuff, right? So the first thing that we need to understand what is UiPath Studio Activities. Okay. So in UiPath Studio, activity represents a unit of action. Each activity performs some actions, and when these activities be combined together, it becomes a workflow, or sometimes we call it is a process if it is a single workflow process, right? Every activity that we're going to use, they usually reside in the activities panel. You should be able to search for the particular activity and use it in your project with the help of the search bar that we have on an activity panel, right? For example, if you want to use the activities related to Excel or CSV file, you should be able to find all of those activity in UiPath.excel.activities package, right? They are grouped together in a package so that it's easy to navigate. So if you look at the screen, all the activities related to Excel, they are inside the processing. I mean, this screen is pretty old, so I'll quickly go to here and then showcase you. So if you type Excel, so you should be able to see all these, activities are listed here, and they are grouped in a package. And to create a workflow, all we need to do is use these activities. Every activity that we use, right, we have some of the properties. Some of those properties are mandatory and some of those properties are optional, right? So what we need to learn is we need to understand which activities are used for which operation or which action, and what are the mandatories properties that we need to fill information into. So that's the basic thing you need to understand for any activities, right? Now, someone will ask, we have limited number of activities and I want to use an activity that is given by third party. Say for example, I want to automate a process which contains database operations. I mean, communication with database, getting a record, inserting a record, updating a record, right? Those kind of things. Those activities are by default not available, right? If you type database here, you will not see anything. In those scenario, what you need to do is you need to click on manage packages, right? A pop-up window will appear, and in the pop-up window, you should be able to select whatever the package that you need to install. So I'll type database here. It will list all the packages which are given by different providers. There could be organization or there could be a person itself. I mean, we should be able to create a package and we should be able to publish on marketplace. And I'll showcase you the example. So as of now, we are going to use a UiPath database activity. So first thing that you need to do is you need to search with the keyword, select the database activity, click on install and save. The moment you click on save, this activity will be added as a part of project dependency. So if you see here, now it has been added as a project dependencies, right? Now, when you go to activities and you type database, you should be able to see bulk insert, bulk update, connect, disconnect, execute, none query, execute query, insert and start transactions. These were not available, right, previously. What I'm trying to say here is by default, there are only Excel, mail, system and UI automation related activities are available. If your automation require any additional packages, you need to include that package inside your project dependency for that to work. Right? You got my? So that's about this activities. So you got to know how these activities can be managed inside a UiPath Studio. One thing you need to know is there are a lot of third-party provided packages that you can manage from the package window. But inside your organizations, these need to be restricted. Why these need to be restricted is, say for example, inside the automation, you have used a package or activity given by XYZ person, right? Who is not actively working on fixing the issues or bug or securities on that particular package. It may be a problem in future. So whenever you try to build an automation, restrict yourself to use the packages or activities given by UiPath. If at all it is not possible by UiPath, try to see if you should be able to automate the task using some custom codes. Then, if there is no option left and you need to be dependent on a third party provider activities, then in the last option you should consider that. Otherwise, it will be a security problem for your organization. We know the packages which are designed and developed by UiPath follow the best practices and securities and all other things, right? They are published on the marketplaces, so we can assume that they are not harmful, right? But in future, they are not longer being maintained by the provider. They could maintain an activity or package. Say, for example, I have a time today. I created a package published into UiPath Studio, right? And someone from you using that package inside your organization to automate your stuff. But after 3 months, I am no longer maintaining that package, and that package become obsolete. It consists some security vulnerability, right? So then it will be a problem. So that's the reason what I'm saying is, in case you wish to add a new package, please make sure that you are using from a provider which is capable of providing you regular update. First focus on UiPath based, then third party like Microsoft, Azure and all those things. Then at the end you should look for packages are provided by individual entities, right? Any questions on activities and managing activities before I move to next slide?
Satish, we are installing managed packages. So these are third parties or
okay,
not?
all right, so let me for this go back to here. Okay, so when you click on manage packages,
And I have one more question.
Yes, please.
Sometimes we are doing PDF automation, so at that time we are also did same thing, like we are installing from managed packaging like PDF, read PDF activities.
Right, I'll tell you. Yeah, I got your point, Amandeep. So let me explain you. See, when you click on a settings, right, it gives you the source of the packages that you need to trust, right? So if you look at here, it's looking for the packages inside my local directory. It's also looking for the official feed, which is my get.org, which basically keeps all the nugget packages. Then the marketplace, which is UiPath marketplace, and then the orchestrator host. In most of the organization, when I say most of the organization, they'll restrict this to only fetch the information from your host or orchestrator. All of these options will be disabled, right? So they'll restrict that you can download a packages. It was earlier not possible, but now with the help of governance rule, automation governance file that we can create for each individual, it's possible to restrict a user to use a third-party package. Previously, it was not under the control. So any developer can use any package they can download from the internet. If internet is there, the package will be downloaded and he can use or she can use it. But now it is controlled, right? Coming back to your second question, how should we get to know that whether a package is provided by third party? It's pretty simple. All you need to do is go on all packages and let's take example of PDF, right? So in the PDF, three packages are appeared here, right? This package is given by whom? So you can see the author is this one, and you should be able to look at the license and project information. Usually we do not look at these informations, right? And we simply click on install and use inside our project. But we don't know what would be the repercussion. We don't know what are the license terms. Are we allowed to use or not allowed to use? Because the moment you use this, your company will become, you know, your company will become a user of that particular product and they need to follow a, agreement, right? So usually what you need to do, all the packages which are with the UiPath icon here, that need to be used. And you should avoid any packages which is custom unless you trust the source, right? Like say for example, we trust the source like Google. That package coming from Google is good, right? So we should be able to use all these, the one provided by Google, right? You should be able to check this information. Got my point?
Yes, Satish.
Yeah. So for sake of simplicity, I'll enable them and click on the cancel and that's it. So this is about the manage studio activities, right? Now let's recall from the previous lecture. So we discussed briefly about four type of working structure when developing a workflow file, right? We have sequence, we have a flow chart, we have a state machine, and then global handler. Sequence are suitable for a linear process. When I say linear, that enables you to go smoothly from one activity to another without going back to the previous stage. So that's a definition of sequence. Flow chart are suitable for more complex business logic, which requires lot of decision and connectivity between one activity to another activity. In general, it provides you ability to go back to the previous step, right? Third type of workflow that we can design in UiPath is a state machine, right? State machines are suitable for large workflow. They use the concept of theory of automata. We must have read in your engineering books, right? They use the concept of finite number of states, their execution, which are triggered by a condition called transition or activity. And then we have a global handler. The global handler is for determining workflow behavior when something globally has to be handled. Like if something goes wrong, like execution error happened, right? And we need to send an email with a screenshot, those kind of behavior you can define a global handler. I am not really a good fan of a global handler because I think this could be done appropriately in the workflow itself, and there is no use of global handler if you are designing a well-defined exception handling. But in simple scenarios where you have a small process, you can design a global handler which can handle most of the exceptions. People are using it. I do not use it personally, right? So let's quickly look at the sequence in more detail. So if you look at the, this PPT, at the right hand side, you can see a workflow is, basically going from one step to another step to another step, and then there is a condition. So it's not that in the sequence we cannot create a conditions or we cannot create a if else branch statement, right? The only thing is that if we reach to if no match found, there is no way we can connect if no match found going back to assign. And sequence can be used inside a flowchart, right? We can use a sequence inside a flowchart. So only thing that you need to keep in mind, linear succession, one after another. It's sequence. We can go back, and sequence can be used inside a flowchart. So this is an interview question. What is sequence? Then another is, what is flowchart? So as I told you in the previous slide, it provides you a decision making capability, can be used for a both large and small project. It provides a multiple branching and logical operator to perform task. And the beauty of this is it can go back. It can go in a reverse direction, reverse gear, right? So it can go back. So if you look at the screen, after performing step number one, we are incrementing a counter, we are checking a decision, and we are going back to the perform step. So it can go in a backward direction, right? So that's a definition of flowchart. Usually people will ask a question, what is the difference between sequence and flowchart? Can anyone help me to explain this? What is the difference between sequence and flowchart, if you understand it correctly? It's an interview question. Again, anyone?
Satish, can you repeat your question?
What is the difference between flowchart and sequence in UiPath?
Satish, sequence is a simple, like we have only one condition. So we are using sequence, and flowchart we are using for multiple cases. Like if we have multiple choices, then we are using flowchart.
Okay. Anyone else? What
Sequence is a linear process.
Sequence is a linear.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Can we?
Flowchart is like
Yeah.
if else situational, like we can switch the controls, like multiple lines through multiple threads can be created in the flowchart. I mean, like multiple processes. It can be executed.
Sequence will go in one direction only.
Yeah.
Flowchart can go in reverse direction.
Yeah, that's the biggest advantage. That's the biggest advantage. Flowchart. So remember the keywords. You don't need to mug up everything. You don't need to remember the definitions. Keep the keywords in mind. Sequence is linear. Sequence perform one step by another. That's it. Flowchart can work in a reverse direction. We can create a multiple decision points, right? So these kind of things. this will help you to prepare for interview, right? Those who are preparing for. All right, so let's move to the next slide, and then we'll look at what next we need to learn. State machine. Okay, so state machine is also a type of workflow. I told you it can go into a state when it triggered by an activity, and it go into another state when it triggered by another activity. We'll discuss this state machine in much more detail level when we discuss about RE framework, right? So I'm not going to explain much detail as of now. The only thing that you need to understand is for state machine to work, it needs a trigger, it needs a transition to go from one state to another state, right? You should be able to add condition based on which it will jump from one state to another state. So that's the thing that you need to remember for now, and we'll discuss how trigger is created, what is the transition, how we can define an entry exit criteria, and all those kind of things when we discuss RE framework. All right. So let's quickly move to some more basic stuff, right? What is variable and what is argument, and then I go to UiPath Studio and I'll help you to explain how it can be done on doing some practicals. All right, there is another interview question: how you can create a variable. What are the different ways of creating a variable? So variable can be created in three ways. One, using a variable panel, which is at the bottom of UiPath Studio, right? Then from a designer panel.
Yes.
And then from properties panel. You need to remember a shortcut key, which is Ctrl+K, that will be used most of the time to create a variable. If somebody asks you about what is variable, So you can give any definition from any of the programming languages because it's also using the .NET based programming language. So variable are used to store data of a type, data of a single type or a multiple type, right? It can change values and it depends on what all activities are manipulating the values into it, right? UiPath supports a large amount of large amount of data types. In fact, all the data type that has been supported by .NET. So you should be able to store generic values. You should be able to store text, which is a string. We should be able to store a number, which could be further divided into integer, double, and so and so. Similarly, a data table, which is nothing but a row and column form of information, then array, list, data, all those kind of information. You can also able to store object. That object can contains a complex object, right? So we'll not discuss all of those things. If you want to read more about what kinds of languages and variables are supported by UiPath, you can simply search .NET language supported types, and you should be able to get answer. If somebody asks you what kinds of variables are supported by UiPath, you simply say all .NET language supported data types are supported by UiPath, right? Other thing that you need to understand is there is a concept of scope, right? Similar to public private, right? Similar to public private that we discuss in other programming language, here is a concept of scope. When you define a variable, a scope is defined, right? So say for example, there is a workflow and you defined a variable inside a for loop. That variable will be only accessible inside that limited scope and cannot be used globally, right? So you need to sometime a lot of freshers used to come to me and they ask, sir, I have assigned a value to variable but it is printing 0 here. Why it is? Because the scope is different. A variable can be defined, same variable can be defined into multiple scopes and all those kind of things. So you need to take care of scope. Other thing is that create a practice of defining a variable with consistent naming. You can follow your organization guidance, but you should follow a consistent naming conventions, right? So you can use a camel case, or you can use data type underscore and then the type of variables like str underscore name or employee name, those kind of thing. It depends on your organization's naming convention used, right? Other thing is that you should also avoid creating a multiple variable unnecessarily. Try to reduce the number of variable as you can when designing a workflow. Okay, so let's move to next concept, theoretical concept, and then we'll move to UiPath Studio. And this will be the last theoretical concept for today, and then we'll go to UiPath Studio. What is arguments and what is the purpose and use of it? This is another interview question, right? They usually ask what are the directions of argument. So you need to tell, we can define in, out, and in out, right? Let's first understand what is argument. So argument is simply a variable which can store a value. You can create an argument in the argument sections of UiPath Studio in the designer panel. I'll showcase you. Argument has larger scope than a variable and it is used to pass a value between different workflow, right? So for this, I'll end the slide and then I'll quickly go to the UiPath Studio and I help you to explain why I'm saying this. So you can define a argument here, right? It is no different than variables. It is not different than variables, right? I'll explain you the scope and everything. It is no different than variables. If you look at the difference, it is saying about the directions. So it is at these directions, right? In, out, and in, out, right? Arguments are used to pass values between different workflows. Say for example, some calculation has happened into this workflow and I need to pass the output of the calculation to next workflow. So in those cases, what I need to do is I need to define a workflow let's take example of that. I have defined a sequence. Okay. And inside the sequence too, I'll create a argument called result. Okay. And its direction should be in, because I am accepting argument. If I am passing an argument, it should say out. Or if you are passing and saving the data, I mean doing calculation as well, there are cases when you have to pass a value to from workflow A to B, and in the B you do perform some calculation, and then some same data is to be passed to C. So in A it will be used as out, in B it will be used as in out, and in C it will be used as in, right? So that's how you can define. And similarly, you should be able to define the types of argument. I'll discuss this again. Let's quickly look at this particular example that I have created. And guys, this is really important for you to understand. Those having some UiPath Studio knowledge prior, right? It's good for them. They should be able to understand it quickly. But those who are starting fresh, those who do not have any idea about anything, please feel free to ask me. Feel free to stop me, right? Ask me again and again, because these are the basic building block. If you understand these things correctly, you should be able to create good automation. Okay. All right. So in this example, what I have done is, first thing I have used the input. So for sake of simplicity, to help you understand all of these activity, I'll go to the next, this one, and then I'll try to repeat this one. Okay. So the first thing that I have done here is input dialog. Okay. What I have done is I have taken an activity called input. And this will be used to take an input from user. It's like an input box that we create in a Visual Basic. Those who are coming from Visual Basic or .NET background, you can think this as input box. What are the properties used inside here? So if you look at the properties, you should be able to give a title of this, enter your name, like this, and then again in the label you should be able to say name here or something. When you run this sequence, it will give you a pop-up message saying input dialog, right? And the result you should be able to store in the variable. Whatever the input you will give, that result will be stored into this variable. As I told you that we should be able to create a variable from 3 options. One is here, another one is here, and so all you need to do is press Ctrl K and you need to say result. So a variable would be created here. By default, it's a string type and scope is a sequence, which is higher to this one. So you should be able to change the sequence scope. As of now, there is no other workflow. That's the reason its scope is sequence. And when you run this, you will see an input box coming here. So you see here, enter your name. That's a label here, and that's a title, and name here is a label, and you need to give the type it here. At the moment you press OK, the result will be saved into result. So, or you can print. So for printing the values, you can do two things. One is you can use a log message, or you can use write line. Right? Log messages have different properties. Basically, it's we'll discuss this in more detail when we discuss exception handling. Or as of now, you can understand is their criticality is different, and that's how they are represented differently into the orchestrator. So if we define something with error, it will print in red. If in warning, it will print in amber. If info, it is print in informative style. So let's put it info. And what we need to print is result, right? Last time you remember, for printing a result, we need to put .toString. This time not. Reason being, the variable that we defined here is already a string. If it is a different type, if it is a number or could be any type, other type, we need to convert that into string to print it. Right, guys? And then in the right line also, I'll print result. And now when I trigger this, it will ask you for an input. And when I give a name, it will print values here. So you'll see the values are printed here. Any doubt in input activity? Any doubt in input activity? Okay, tell me what is the limitation of input activity in UiPath?
Limitation means?
What we can't take an input?
Manage packages are deleted every time. Packages are deleted every time. We need to every time store.
Yeah. So first thing is it is not persistent, Amar. Other thing is that we don't have opportunity or we don't have any properties defined here where we can take a complex input like array or list of objects, right? We can take an input. I mean, what we can do is we can ask here, please enter your name of friends followed by a comma, right? And then we can store that result into a string, and then we do a string manipulation to get multiple values, right? But by default, it do not provide a way through which we can take an input as a list and a string. I mean array of a string, right? So it's a fairly basic input which takes input as a string. Got my point? Right. So you got to know what is input allo. Other activity that I have used is the open browser here. Okay. Before explaining you all of these activity, let me run this to help you to understand what I am going to do and what I'm trying to explain you. So in this example, what I have done is I have created a basic workflow. It asks for the input of your city name. It opens a browser. It types the city name in a browser. It gets the information from a Google, convert that into double that string information, and on the basis of if else conditions, it will show a message box showing that what kind of city I am living in. So I have created a if conditions. So I just wanted to help you to understand how you can define a conditions. Okay, what are the relational operator you can use, how you can use a relational operator multiple times, and how you can use if else statement. So that's the agenda for today class, right? Let me quickly look at the run this. Okay, so I don't know if it is go to the same screen or it will move to the next screen. Let me run it. So it is asking me for input enter a city name. So it asks city name, and then it has launched the Google here, and now it has typed Delhi city area and then this one. I have created the bookmark here. I have shown you last time. I wanted to see what information it has captured. So it has read the values 1484 kilometer square. If you look at the screen, that's what the value there on the screen. This one, right? So in my workflow, I am reading this value information. I am typing here and then I am reading this value. Once I read this value, so I need to split it because I need to get first part of the information, which is 1484. So I am using a split method here, which is of string manipulation, right? Get text is saved into my area. My area which is a string type of a variable, has to be splitted on the basis of k. And in this, then the result will be stored as 1484. So if I go to step next, you will see it is converted into 1484, and then now the value will be converted into double so that we can perform these logical operations. Otherwise, we need to convert them into string, right? String operations can be performed. So for these numeric operations, relational operation, calculations, we need to convert this into double. So I have used convert.toDouble and then the string that we have captured from here. So it is 1484, and 1484 will come into this double. As of now, this is, you can see it is 0, right? Move into the next step. Now it will become 1484. Now, how can you use the if-else statement? So as of now in the modern design, else part is hidden. You can click on hide it, this one. So what I have done is I have compared the value captured from the browser to check if it is greater than 300. If it is greater than 300, it will come here and it will print big city, right? Then it will come here and it will check if it is greater than 200 and less than 200, then it will be a medium city. Or it could be, then again come here and check. Someone will ask why we can't put these into here in the else statement. We can put it, right? We can move this block here. We can also move this block into this here, right? Like this one. So we can move like this. Let me stop it. Instead of writing multiple if statement, we could have if else, and inside else we could have multiple if else, right? Any doubt on this, what I'm trying to do here?
I want to know convert to double.
Okay, convert to double is basically, I told you that I'm using a condition here, right? I'm using a condition to evaluate true or false, right? So for this condition to work, because this I need to convert, I need to check with the integer values or double values, right? I cannot do a direct comparison with a string, and that's the reason I need to convert it to double. That's a basic programming stuff that we do in each programming language. We need to convert it to integer, we need to convert it to double, we need to convert it to different types, right? All right. So now let me help you explain what all other activities I have used. So open browser is another one. So let me take what is open browser. So when we need to launch a browser for any website or web page to open, we are using open browser. And all you need to do is give a URL that you need to launch. The moment you give the URL, it will perform. And then you see this do block. So this is do inside a container of open browser, right? This container enable you to open a browser and execute multiple activities inside it, right? So let's take example of this one here. So if you look at open browser is used and the entire set of activities is done inside the browser. You should be able to minimize and maximize all the activity. And I have used Google browser. So it will open up a browser. Next, I have used a type into input. Type into input, which is a type into activity. So how to use a type into activity? Let's look at that. Type into activity. So type, when you click on type into activity, it will ask you for two things: where you need to type and what text you need to type, right? It takes two input information, right? What is the text and what is the target? These are two mandatory things. Other things are optional. These we'll discuss more in detail when we follow the best practices. Sometimes you need to clear the text. Sometimes you need to, delay between the keys. Your application is not performing too fast. It need to wait before it type next character and all those kind of things. For those reasons, we use these options. But two mandatory input that has to be given is target and text, right? So let's take example of this one. I want to say, for example, let's take example of this one. I want to type here. I want to type into this, right? So in the open browser, I'll copy this URL, put into here, right? And then you have to indicate inside a browser. So you need to go here and so okay. So this error happens when you don't have administrative right on the machine, right? Sometime. So if you don't have administrative right, you need to run the UiPath Studio as administrator so that sometime it happens. So instead of using that, I can use a Chrome. Let's use a Chrome. I say browser type as Chrome and I'll launch that in the Chrome page and then I'll do a quick how input has to be taken. So I have used Chrome now. Okay. So I'll click on start by default and now I need to type it here. So for typing, what I can do is I can go here, indicate inside a browser, and then again it's not allowing me. I need to restart the UiPath Studio. Let me save this and restart it. Okay, guys. UiPath Studio run as administrator. And then you should be able to define, the text and all those things. Okay. Any doubt here? All with me? You able to understand?
Yes.
All right. Similarly, when we read, we need to read some information. We can also get the text. So these all things I'll explain you in much detail when we reach to a point where we'll work with automating applications with the browser. So in tomorrow lesson, we'll work on multiple things. So tomorrow lesson would be how to automate email, right? So we'll be reading some email, we'll be fetching information from email and perform some operations on the emails. So that will be the first task tomorrow. Then we'll work with extracting some information from Amazon website. And then we'll also see how UiPath Recorder works. So these are the three things that we'll discuss in much detail tomorrow. For as of now, you got to know how we should be able to, drag and drop the activities and all those things, right? Is there any doubt into this? How to modify the properties values here? How to debug it? Do you have any questions around this?
No.
All right. So guys, there is a one thing I need to ask you guys. You need to complete one assignment. That's assignment for module 2 that we have discussed today morning. So in module 2 we have used UiPath Task Capture. So what you need to do is you need to install UiPath Task Capture on your machine. You need to perform the steps that I have done in today morning, that open a browser, go to Google, navigate to image search, search using keyword Happy New Year 22, open image in extended mode, save the image on desktop with rename. So this is the step you need to follow manually with the recording on. Once it is recorded, you need to export the PDD, right? You need to, work in the task capture, modify some of the action name, modify some of the, Windows description, highlight the elements and all those things, and then export PDD to see how it looks. Then you need to export the XAML file and open into Studio. Try to play around it, whether your automation is working or not, what all things that you need to change, right? And then you need to submit us three things. First is a ClickTrail file, which is captured using task capture. Then you need to submit us sample PDD file, which is exported from task capture, and then sample XAML file, which is created from task capture. So these three things files to be grouped together, named as assignment for module 2.zip. That's all you need to send. Okay. Other thing is for module number 4, which is we just completed now, which is UiPath Studio overview, you need to also prepare assignment. And this assignment is pretty easy. So it has given you all the details, what all steps you need to follow. So you need to play with flowchart and sequences. These are pretty basic example. All you need to do is create some variable, do some calculations, decide if the number is greater than those kind of thing, right? Just to play around with UiPath Studio. It will not, if you have prior knowledge of UiPath Studio, it will not take more than 10-20 minutes. Okay. So you need to follow step by step to keep practicing. And then problem number 4 here, right? You need to use a UiPath recorder, which is here. Okay. So try using a basic or a desktop recorder to perform that task. And I'll help you to explain in the next, tomorrow session, how this recorder works, what are the best practices we need to follow. And then we'll also go through some of the looping concepts when we do a mail automation with emails, right? And all of those things. After today, all our relations would be based on problems, right? And I'll explain the concept inside solving a problem technique, like like for loop, right? We need to understand how for loop works in a UiPath Studio. But I'll not take a theoretical lesson of that. Instead, when I work with the emails automation, I'll help you to explain how to loop over the emails, right? And how to save the attachment and all those kind of stuff. Okay. Any doubts on this? Today lesson was pretty small, so we are binding early. I still have a few minutes. If you have any questions to ask, you can feel free to ask. Anything related to program, training, doubts, materials, everything, anything. Do you have anything to ask, guys?
No question.